Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that Canada will recognize intends to recognize a Palestinian state. He hasn't formally recognized a Palestinian state yet, but attaching certain conditions to it that make me think that if he does keep those conditions, he'll never be recognizing a Palestinian state. That's how I read it.
Well, that's called having your cake and eating it too. And that seems to be I believe we're going to go into this a little bit more deeply later, but by and large, Mr. Carney says what he would like to happen and then places conditions on it so that he's got an escape route if things change. Now, in this case, it's not Indigenous agreement and Quebec agreement that he's looking for. That would be a pipeline. But he wants to set three conditions on it. That Hamas would not be part of any forthcoming, going forward, any Palestinian state, that the Hezbollah in West Bank will also disarm, which to some extent they've been disarmed, but they don't like it. I can't imagine that they would ever want to stay that way. So, you put these conditions out there, and maybe they happen, maybe they don't. And if they don't, so, well, we tried.
Corey. So yeah, he did. He put down these conditions, and as did some heads of other governments around the world. Hamas has to be disarmed. Has to play no role in the government. The Palestinian, the hostages have to be released, and said Palestinian state has to recognize the right of Israel to exist. I mean, where the border should get drawn, to some extent, is a fair debate. To some extent, is a fraught debate. But these conditions are actually, under those conditions, if they were theoretically possible, I'd say, okay, actually, those are pretty reasonable conditions, I think, to recognize a Palestinian state. The Palestinians have to recognize the Israeli state and not go to war for maybe a period of, 2 weeks, if they can do that for 2 weeks.
New record, yeah.
Yeah. They're actually fairly, I think, reasonable demands to make that, if met, I think would be, a good, grounds for which to recognize a Palestinian state. But I don't think there's any chance. Like, Hamas is, the Gaza Strip looks worse than Tokyo or Dresden right now. It's gone. And they're still fighting. They're not disarming. They're not giving up the hostages. I'm not really sure. The only reason I can see them continuing to fight is it's imposing an increasingly great political price on Israel and the Israeli government, turning world opinion against them. Not necessarily in favor of Hamas, but at least against the Israelis. That's the only reason I can see why they still keep fighting at this point.
Well, they're ideological maniacs, and you're asking for reason from them. I mean, their response to having world countries saying, okay, let's reward them for their terrorism if they would just be nice again, and we'll give you your own state. And what they do, they released videos showing them torturing the prisoners they still have in custody right now. Like, Carney is no fool, whatever he may be. There is no reasoning with Hamas. Hamas made it pretty clear right off the bat, no, we aren't disarming. No, we aren't releasing. They extended a nice big middle finger to the countries asking for that, and they want nothing less than the complete obliteration of Israel. So I don't know where this is going to end, but Carney won't. He's just trying to play both sides, and he's playing weak. I mean, what do people expect? Israel's supposed to just leave them there to keep firing more rockets and grabbing more hostages? The reality is the world's got to start calling for Hamas to bloody well put the blame where it is. Well, this is only going to end when they stop.
The Arab League just came.
Yeah, they've come out. Yeah,
that's a big blow against Hamas when even the Arab League is like, guys, the jig is up. Time to go home.
The other thing that has to be understood, as you pointed out, most of Gaza is rubble, and guess what? Hamas is still hiding hostages and still launching rockets. Gazans are complicit. Not every one of them, but let's not pretend that Hamas isn't operating without the blessing of a large part of the civilian population as well. And I see it's showing clearly that it doesn't seem to matter how much abuse they take, the civilians won't turn on Hamas. But this isn't ending until Hamas is done. There's no other way about this.
Erica, if, say, Palestine, and I put that in air quotes, there's two Palestinian governments. There's Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and then arguably Israel as well as a third order of government there. But if Palestine, if we can call it that, disarmed Hamas did play no role. The hostages are released, and they agreed to recognize Israel. They probably wouldn't recognize their claim on Jerusalem, but let's say they recognized everything and that was just left as a point of negotiation for later. Do you think, Carney and others would be right in recognizing a Palestinian state if those conditions could be fulfilled?
Well, I think we're talking about sunshines and rainbows, so
We
sure.
are here. We are.
Yes,
Yes.
and so sure, but like cart before the horse. And right now, we, like you said, but all the three of you, separating Hamas from the state of Palestine I see it pretty unrealistic in the current state. There's lots of what ifs that have to happen in order for that. So for our prime minister to come out and say, okay, all of these conditions, this, and this, which an average Canadian isn't going through the fine print of these conditions that are hypothetical to some degree. He's now sitting here saying all that Canadians pick up is I am going to recognize in September with other nations. And I will say there is some Eastern or Western European countries that are also saying the same, but that we're going to recognize Palestine as a state. I can tell you from the left-leaning people that I know and follow on social media, that was the whole message, was like, regardless of that fine print, the prime minister is going to recognize Palestine as a state. And I think what that did was really divide our country even more. It also, resulted in tariffs from the South to respond to that decision that our prime minister premeditated or preemptively stated before even getting to September. So sure, I think that we could say that's an appropriate thing if A, B, C, D, E, F, G happen. I just think we're still at A. And so for what this means for Canada, we've already got some backlash of taking that position. I also think it's setting a tone where if you've ever gone to Ottawa in the last year or so, the disruption of their protests. We've seen it all across the country. We've seen post-secondaries be taken over to stand up for the Palestinians. The fact that we are Canada and we have taken an aggressive position on either side is disappointing to me at best.
I do agree with that. I mean, I think we've got to get out of the habit, particularly of those of us on the more conservative side, of thinking we actually really have a stake there. We don't. It's a different country. It's a different part of the world. I wish everyone there well. Wish them peace. And
for everyone, there's both sides have been very guilty of hurting innocent people. And I think us taking a stance either way, especially when you said to what benefit of us.
Exactly. What is in our national interest? What national interest is being served? So, Nigel, this raises the question, why? Why did Mark Carney say this? I think Erica is correct that most people just heard Canada is going to be recognizing a Palestinian state. I think how many people see people do this all the time? They just read the headline on X or wherever. They don't read the story. If you read the story, I actually don't think it's a particularly unreasonable way to go about it. I don't think there's any chance Hamas ever agrees to it because it's too reasonable. They won't agree to it. Maybe I'm wrong, but like, why? Is it simply the domestic voting audience that he's trying to appeal to? The combination of kind of campus lefties and the large and growing Islamic vote in Canada by saying this, but then attaching conditions to it that make it highly unlikely that if he sticks to those conditions, that Canada will ever be recognizing a Palestinian state in the near future.
Well, I think after the events of October the 7th, 2023, nobody wants to see the Hamas rewarded with its own state. But Carney is correct. Mr. Carney, I should say, is correct in this much that a two-state solution has always been Canada's policy, even during the ministry of Stephen Harper, who was famously very, very pro-Israel, and therefore by definition opposed to Hamas and Hezbollah. he was, I pulled it off the files here. He made this statement in West Bank during an interview back in 2014. And he said, let me just say the position of the government of Canada, I think, as you know well, is we favor and indeed believe that these matters can only be resolved through a two-state solution with two states. And of course, he here claimed his conditions, which are essentially the same as Carney's, just differently worded. Two states that are viable, prosperous, secure, democratic, and living in peace.